Hello, and welcome back to Talks with Ethan and Marcus.
And for those joining us for the first time, a quick word. Here, we speak honestly and openly about what usually scares or holds people back. Public speaking, fears, mistakes, growth, and everything that makes us more confident.
These are the topics we'll be breaking down in our first 5 episodes.
And later, we'll discuss completely different aspects of life and personal growth.
In our last episode, we learned that most fears about facing an audience are just an illusion, and that we already practice our skills daily through small performances.
Today, we're moving on to something new. We'll talk about perfectionism and why the pursuit of an ideal often halts our development.
You know, Marcus, I have to admit, I'm literally paralyzed by the thought that something might go wrong. I put off ideas because this one thought just circles in my head. What if it's not perfect? As a result, I don't do anything at all.
Ethan, that's a very familiar feeling. And honestly, you're not the only one. Perfectionism is a trap. It sounds good, I'm striving for the best, but in reality, it steals our forward momentum. You stay in place because you're afraid to take a step that might not be perfect.
But we're taught from a young age, do it well or don't do it at all. How do I let go of that?
And that's the biggest lie. Think about it. Who has ever done something perfectly on the first try? No one. Children fall dozens of times before they learn to walk. Musicians play hundreds of wrong notes before a melody emerges. Successful businesses had failed startups before them. Perfectionism kills life itself, because life always starts with chaos, mistakes, and imperfection.
So, it's better to do something imperfect and gain experience than to wait for the right moment.
Exactly. Every action, even an unsuccessful one, teaches us a lesson. A mistake isn't the end. It's feedback that tells you, this is not the way to do it, try something else. But inaction, that's what's truly dangerous. It takes away time, energy, and opportunities.
It sounds like having the right to make a mistake is the main key to development.
Absolutely. Think about it. When you allow yourself to make mistakes, you become freer. A sense of lightness appears. Sometimes the most genuine, most powerful speeches or projects are the ones with the few flaws, because they are alive. Something perfect and sterile is boring. It doesn't grab you.
Now I see that perfectionism isn't a demand for quality, but fear. Fear of doing something wrong.
And that's exactly what you need to get rid of. Because growth isn't about perfection, it's about movement. It's about having the courage to take steps even when they're uncertain. And that's the only way we become stronger.
Marcus, you know what scares me the most? When I imagine making a mistake right in the middle of a speech.
That's a very common feeling, Ethan. But it's important to understand, mistakes are not a disaster. They are a natural part of any process.
Easy for you to say. What if I forget a word or stumble? People will think I'm unprepared.
Here's the interesting part. Most listeners won't even notice minor mistakes. They aren't sitting there with a checklist waiting for you to mess up. They care more about whether they get value and energy from your speech.
So, even if I make a few mistakes, the main thing is not to stop.
Exactly. And what's more, mistakes make a speech feel alive. They show that you're real. Imagine if someone speaks absolutely flawlessly, like a robot. It's even a bit unsettling. But when there are natural pauses, a small or a correction in the speech, listeners feel your authenticity.
So, it turns out I've been wrong to think I have to speak by the book.
That's right. A mistake is a signal. Here's something you can learn from and improve. If you perceive it not as a defeat, but as a hint, then every performance becomes practice.
I like that approach. It takes some of the pressure off. Instead of thinking I have no right to make a mistake, I can think every mistake is training.
Absolutely. Sometimes the best stories after a speech start with the phrase, "You know, I got tangled up back then, but it led to a funny moment." And that is remembered much more than dry correctness.
Okay, I already understand that mistakes are normal, but why did you say a perfect speech can be boring?
Because perfection often kills emotion. Imagine a person who has memorized a text delivering it without a single pause or deviation. It seems correct, but there's no feeling of life.
Yes, I've been to presentations like that. The content is interesting, but it's hard to listen to because everything seems too polished.
Exactly. People don't just come for the facts, they come for the energy. If you deviate a little from the plan, add a joke, or react to the audience, it creates a real connection. Sterile perfection makes a speech cold.
So, a little spontaneity makes a speech lively.
Precisely. Listeners remember not the perfectly rehearsed paragraphs, but the moments that had emotion, sincerity, or even a small surprise.
It's interesting. It turns out that when I try to polish everything to perfection, I'm actually making it worse for myself.
Yes, perfection creates a distance between you and your audience. But openness, authentic connection, and even a little chaos make a speech more relatable and engaging.
It's like the difference between a live concert and a studio recording. The studio version is flawless, but the live performance has the real drive.
That's a great comparison. That's why you should allow yourself to be genuine, not perfect. What's perfect is often boring, but what's alive is always captivating.
Okay, then I'll stop being afraid of imperfection and start seeing it as a chance for emotion and connection.
That's the secret. Imperfection equals life, and life is always more interesting than a perfect script.
You know, Marcus, I've noticed that the biggest changes in my life have always happened when I took action, even when I didn't feel ready. That feeling of still having fear and doubt, but taking the step anyway, it's incredibly inspiring.
Exactly, because growth isn't about books or ideas in your head. You can spend years thinking about how you'll give a speech, what you'll say, and how you'll look, but real growth only begins when you get on stage, try, do, and analyze.
And even small steps have power. You don't have to speak in front of 100 people right away. Start with 3 colleagues, with friends, or even in front of a camera for yourself. Each one of these steps changes how you feel about yourself, the audience, and the process.
Another important point is that action kills fear. When we sit and think, what if I forget my words? What if they laugh? The anxiety grows. But once you make the first move, the fear starts to shrink. Because you're already in the process, and mistakes don't feel like a disaster. They become part of the learning.
It's like in sports. You can imagine a workout, plan strategies, and watch videos, but only physical movement develops your body. It's the same here. Moving forward develops your confidence, makes skills real, and not just an idea in your head.
Sometimes you look at others and think, they're so confident, they know what they're doing. But in reality, everyone started with small steps, mistakes, and failed attempts. And only taking action made them strong. It's a good reminder not to wait for the perfect moment. It rarely comes.
Plus, action creates momentum. One small step leads to the next. When you start, other things also start to move. Your preparation, inspiration, and confidence. Sometimes this effect is so powerful that after the first step, it feels like you've opened the door to a new world.
So the conclusion is simple. Action is the key. Don't wait for the perfect moment or for complete readiness. It's better to take an imperfect step now than to wait for the perfect one and never start. Take action and growth will come with experience.
You know, Marcus, I've started to understand one thing. There's no real learning without risk. When everything is safe and predictable, we're just repeating what we already know how to do.
Absolutely. Think about it. Every time you try to speak, it's a risk. You might forget your words, get your thoughts mixed up, or say something weird. And that's where the strength comes from. Without the possibility of failure, there's no possibility of growth.
But most people think a mistake is a disaster, as if when you mess up on stage, everything is lost.
And that's the trap. A mistake isn't the end. It's proof that you've stepped outside what's familiar, that you're trying to master new territory. If you only ever say what's safe and do what you've done 100 times before, there won't be any progress.
So it seems that risk and mistakes are markers that I'm truly learning. It's like in sports. If your muscles never ache, it means you're not giving them a new challenge.
Exactly. And the more of these risky repetitions you do, the faster you grow. Every speech, even if it feels unsuccessful, gives you experience you can't get from a book or from others' advice. It's like a practical training tool. You go out, you try, you stumble, and that's what makes you stronger.
I'm reminded of the example of a child learning to walk. They fall dozens of times, but no one calls it a failure. It's part of the process. It's the same with public speaking. Falling and risks aren't enemies, they're allies.
And here's the main idea. If you avoid risk, you stay in an illusion of safety. But in reality, you're just standing still. But if you allow yourself to take risks, every mistake turns into a stepping stone.
So the conclusion is simple. Risk isn't something undesirable, but a necessary condition for development. The more often you step towards the unknown, the faster you become confident, flexible, and authentic. So, the main point today is that perfectionism only gets in the way. Mistakes are our allies because they are what push us forward.
Exactly. And risk and action create true growth.
I really enjoyed this conversation. It reminded me that imperfection makes us human.
Me too. A very valuable discussion. I'm glad we brought up this topic.
In our next episode, we'll talk about how to capture an audience's attention and keep it until the end.
That will be very practical. Don't miss it. Subscribe and leave comments. Your opinion is important to us.